Hi, Diablo Frank here. I'm recording this introduction at 5 o'clock in the morning of November 9th, 2016. At about 10 o'clock last night, I cracked open a bottle of wine, killed it before 11, wished I'd opened a second, finally passed out around 1 o'clock, although passed out isn't really the word because I was too anxious and horrified to be fully embraced by red wine. Woke up at 4 o'clock this morning. Can't go to sleep. Figured I might as well finish up this podcast. The simple truth is that sometimes hatred and fear win out over love and understanding. Sometimes when I'm extra cynical, expecting only the worst from the world, people surprise me by showing their basic goodness. But then there are other days like today where my worst fears are borne out, where my worst assumptions of people turn out to be fact. I don't know about you folks, but I've really been enjoying the second season of Supergirl as it's moved to the CW. A lot of people have complained that it's too simplistic, too arch, too on the nose in its politics, involving a conspiracy to besmirch and eject aliens from the planet Earth. A show that, despite a thin veneer of sophistication, is pretty clearly targeted toward children, but involving supporting characters coming out as lesbians. Just a few months back, there was a Captain America movie where Steve Rogers is basically legislated out of his role, and we're expecting a future movie where he becomes something like Nomad, a man without a country, who despite his great service is no longer wanted by a goodly portion of the populace to serve as a sentinel of liberty. There are a lot of people who think that the superhero stories are just supposed to be escapist fictions, just a good time, don't bring your politics into it. But when our real world lacks for heroes, when it feels like evil is winning or is won, we look to our fictitious heroes and heroines to help dust ourselves off, pick ourselves back up again, and help us to recall the courage necessary to renew the fight for a better tomorrow. When the Wonder Woman movie comes out next year, it won't be greeted by the USA's first female president, but we will get to see an amazing Amazon fight against a authoritarian, misogynist, xenophobic regime. And I think this morning I'm looking forward to seeing that now more than ever. Because the Diana Prince Wonder Woman podcast has come out so sporadically up till now, and because I have a bunch of other podcasts where I talk about comic book stuff, I don't think I've gotten around to addressing either of the Wonder Woman trailers within the context of the Wonder Woman podcast I put out. So I thought I would briefly reevaluate the trailer that came out in July of this year, and then share my thoughts on the brand new trailer that just came out last week. So the original teaser trailer opens with Princess Diana having just saved Steve Trevor. And I like how it opens with Steve looking up at Gadot and seeing the sky. I sincerely hope there's a line about him believing her to be an angel, at least initially, as a callback to most of the comics from the 80s backwards.
You have been my greatest love.
In my earlier viewings of the teaser, this line just sort of brushed past me. As I've been thinking more about the character and talking with other folks about her, the importance of that mother-daughter relationship has come to the fore of my mind in terms of Wonder Woman's representation in the media. And so when I first heard the line, it felt like an obligatory nod. But in hearing it again and giving a little bit more thought to the words, there's a lot of truth in that, and it speaks to an insight in the character within the script that I hope is borne out in the movie itself. Hippolyta has obviously had a number of flings, and occasionally that's been tied to Wonder Woman's creation, so I always have a knee-jerk reaction against that when she's been tied to Zeus or Heracles. I didn't mind her moments with Ted Grant because obviously nothing much came of those. But it makes me realize that truly Hippolyta's most important relationship is with her daughter, and I do resent it when men are brought into her circle, especially if they're meant to be there in a significant way. Hippolyta is someone who chose to live on an island bereft of men for thousands of years. She didn't express this extraordinary longing for a man, she expressed that longing for her child. And it was so great that the goddesses granted her desire. This is a very meaningful line, and I think it's important to the overall mythos of Wonder Woman. And I didn't give enough credit to the teaser for expressing that. In reviewing the teaser, I'm surprised that I didn't recognize that the woman in the jacked up opera mask is the actress Elena Anaya, especially how I could not see that after seeing The Skin I Live In, the Almodovar movie she made with Antonio Banderas, in which she spends a substantial portion of the movie with another kind of jacked up mask. She's been in a number of movies I've enjoyed, and I'm very relieved that in the new trailer we see that this is clearly not one of the Azarello Chang god beings. This is a human, and quite probably a human with a history history against Wonder Woman in the comic books. We'll get to that in a moment. But the truth is, to me, this was always one of the most striking and intriguing images from the teaser trailer. And I'm just really pleased to see that it appears that that's going to pay off in a big way. I still hate the references to Wonder Woman being created by Zeus, and it still weirds me out to see Connie Nielsen playing Hippolyta, but looking so much like Artemis. And I think she's the one who's doing the giant leap archery moment. That's such an Artemis moment that I'm hoping there are two different Amazons at play here, but Nielsen looks so much like Artemis. I'm just not sure they didn't combine those characters. And rewatching the teaser, there's still so much sword play, so much shield play. I still feel valid in my prior concerns and my irritation with those moments. But I still think the idea of showing trench warfare within the context of a heroic fiction piece like this is really interesting. So much film focused on World War II, not only as it was happening, but afterwards. And not nearly enough time has been spent on World War I, which is a fascinating episode in human history and very much a horror show. In fact, that's actually one of my concerns, is that Wonder Woman might be too bright and hopeful a character to be involved in a war that grim. But I also think that experiencing something like trench warfare could definitely turn off a person from interacting with man's world for a century. I think we have trouble conceiving of how horrifying that was. I still think the magic lasso looks dodgy in the teaser. It reminds me so much of the preliminary work done on the Adrienne Palicki, David E. Kelley television pilot. I wonder if they're going to address that issue or if it's just going to remain an issue and they're not going to let us see any more of it to know that it's an issue.
It's Etta Candy. I'm Steve Trevor's secretary.
What is a secretary?
I go where he tells me to go and I do what he tells me to do.
Oh, well, where I'm from, that's called slavery.
Still think that's a bad joke. Still think the delivery is very forced. Kind of hoping that just ends up in the teaser and doesn't actually appear in the movie. I was not super happy with this trailer the first time I saw it. For the most part, aside from the moments that I just spoke of positively, I still don't feel great about the movie as presented in this teaser. But let's go forward and look at the brand new trailer.
This beautiful place.
Despite the cynicism Wonder Woman displays at the early part of the trailer, I do like how it's a little bit more sedate. I like the serenity revolving around Diana as she watches Steve Trevor's plane crash into the water near the beach of Paradise Island. Her high dive is spectacular. This movie is going to be gorgeous on the big screen. Incredible location shooting. I was very happy to get a longer look at the Amazons and we can see just how racially diverse the group is. It might be tricky getting it in, but I would love to get some name drops of Philippus, Nubia. Don't just have some dark-skinned Amazons off to the side or in the background. Let's have a few that are at the fore. If the actual name Nubia is a problem, maybe they could race swap Artemis, but frankly, I'd rather them just invent an entirely new African descent Amazon. But as with Nubia and especially Philippus, I would love one to be in a primary role, most probably as a advisor to Hippolyta, especially the close relationship that Hippolyta had with Philippus. There's also that particular shot of an Amazon leaping off a cliff, firing an arrow with a line that allows her to swing and attack soldiers that are rushing the beach. And then you have that lingering shot of a bullet flying past Diana and Steve, most probably fatally striking that Amazon. And what it drives home for me in that moment is that each one of these Amazons is thousands of years old. Imagine breaking a ancient vase in a museum and how momentous that would be, how one portion of history is irrevocably lost in that moment. And here's a human being that actually lived through thousands of years of history. Every single time an Amazon dies, it should be this huge momentous tragedy. And taking that moment to see just that one Amazon take that one fatal bullet works for me. It's an excellent reminder of the incalculable value of every single Amazonian life.
What is your mission?
To stop the war.
What war?
The war to end all wars.
As much as I love Wonder Woman's ties to World War II, so many superheroes have similar ties. And while at first I thought it was cheesy to go back a war and then borrow so much imagery and feel from the Captain America movies, it actually works extremely well, I think, to have Wonder Woman be a part of that war, to tie her closely to that in a way that no other superhero really has been. And we forget how big World War I was. It was truly believed to be the war that would end all wars, the greatest war that it would ever be fought. The problem with World War II is it proved proves that World War I wasn't the war to end all wars, and there were whole new atrocities to be invented. So it's almost more innocent to have Wonder Woman be part of that war instead. And of course, it's being contemporaneous to the original women's liberation movement, the suffragettes, the fight to get women the vote. I didn't hate the idea at first, but the more I think about it, the more I love the idea, actually. I think it's great that she's going to be part of the World War I era.
Weapons far deadlier than you can ever imagine.
The explicit use of chemical weapons, which has been banned by all developed nations ever since World War I, to see that used in the first world, it definitely delivers the message that this is a seriously bad situation. And again, it creates imagery that isn't available in the World War II era that Wonder Woman herself can own, or that lore that's being built around her in that period can be more hers. And of course, this is also where we get, I think, inarguable confirmation that Elena Anaya is playing Dr. Poison. Upon first seeing her in the teaser trailer, I again thought that she might be from the newer comics, and I wasn't too wild about that, but her apparent disfigurement and being concealed under a mask most recalled Dr. Cyber, who was introduced in the late 60s, early 70s. It would probably be the closest approximation you could come to a Dr. Doom type for Wonder Woman. And what's funny to me is I still see sites speculating that it might be Baroness von Gunther. But if you pause the trailer at the 58-second mark, it's obviously Dr. Poison. She's wearing essentially the Dr. Poison costume. She's in the green scrubs that are form-fitting. She's surrounded by toxic gases. And Dr. Poison is the kind of character that I don't think works that great in a modern context. It's much more difficult, but she's absolutely perfect for a World War I context. But as soon as you put yourself in the mind frame of, okay, these are the kind of issues we're going to address within this period setting, Dr. Poison is absolutely the perfect villain to have for that story. And it also tells us that while we may perhaps see the more involved mythological creatures or gods within this first movie, that we're probably going to spend a lot of time with a villainess to go against our heroine, which I definitely wanted to see. In a period setting, you can't go with someone obvious like Cheetah. So Dr. Poison completely takes advantage of the changes that have been made. And Dr. Poison is the kind of villain that you could do some cool things with and then leave behind in that era. You don't have to update her in the modern era. And is visually a striking character. So kudos for that decision.
The war can be ours.
So we see that random Hessian bad guy from the teaser is actually going to have a major role in the movie, apparently. He's featured more prominently in the trailer. And that being the case, I'm hoping it's going to be somebody like Helmut Stryker, aka the Red Panzer, who was a Nazi villain created in the late 70s. And again, is the sort of character you can't use in a modern context. But since the word Panzer means armor, and we've already seen him having a drawn-out physical confrontation with Wonder Woman, it'd be cool if maybe he's got armor underneath his uniform, maybe he's some prototype of a cyborg. You wouldn't want to call him Red Panzer because that's a little too close to the Red Skull, but you could have Helmut Stryker running around doing some damage. And there's a few other Nazi guys that he could be too, but it'd be nice if he's not invented for the movies, if he'd been drawn from the comics. Also, that explosion at the minute mark, that's very Ark of the Covenant, isn't it? I think that this is our first indication that we're going to get to see at least some Grecian lore, some supernatural elements in the movie beyond just the Amazons. I think you're going to need a big boss battle at the end. I just hope they don't go to Ares. I think it'd be great to allude to him and perhaps his influence on the start of World War I, but I don't want to see a retread of the 2009 animated movie or the dozens and dozens and dozens of stories about Wonder Woman fighting Ares. Despite his being a core villain, he's never really been one of my favorites. And I'd like for this first movie to involve, again, women versus women without men being central to the conflict.
I cannot stand by while innocent lives are lost.
Now, so far, overall, my impression of the trailer has been positive. This is where I start to have an uncomfortable feeling about where the movie might end up going. I'm not confident that we're going to get to see the contest in the movie. We've not seen any scenes that would indicate that that's going to take place. And that's such a central concept to the character of Wonder Woman that to not have the contest is a huge betrayal of the character. And it was actually a major sticking point for me with the Timverse Justice League Unlimited series of the early 2000s. I got to be honest with you, I've never watched the entire series. I've seen good-sized chunks of it, but I was actually pretty turned off on the show in the first season, in large part because of the treatment of Wonder Woman. I'd never thought that they had a good handling of the character, and I was sickened by the notion that they just had Diana steal the accoutrements of Wonder Woman and go fly off to take part in the initial Justice League adventure, that she's deprived of her origin. She should have had her own animated series, much less having her origin stripped from her by this team cartoon. And it's going to really bother me if they do the same thing with the motion picture, if they just have her steal her way into becoming the people's hero rather than earning it through the contest. Plus, even if there is a contest, it seems like one of the things she'd be winning is a shield and a sword, and I'm not about that, and I don't think Wonder Woman ought to be about that, so that's going to be an issue for me. Okay, we finally get bullets and bracelets, and it's freaking marvelous. It made me so giddy to finally see bracelets deflecting bullets in this movie without a stinking shield. It's also funny to me, I have a hard time believing that the scene in which Diana Prince is rescuing Steve Trevor in a back alley is not intended as a callback to the Richard Donner Superman film, especially given one of the screenwriters' close connections to Richard Donner. You cannot give me enough bullets and bracelets. There's a lot of it at this point onward, and I'm loving every single instance of a projectile striking Amazonian braziers.
It is our sacred duty to defend the world, and it's what I'm going to do.
I'm still not entirely in love with Gal Gadot's delivery of a lot of these lines of dialogue, but the fact that she is making a statement explicitly about heroism and about the role of an individual, the responsibility to society, especially those who are so greatly empowered, who have such a unique opportunity to contribute because of their abilities. I think it does a great job of selling her confrontation with the Germans in the trench warfare moment. It was an okay scene in the teaser, but by setting it up so well and showing how dangerous it was for her to rise up and take on the threat head on, it's sold so much better in the full trailer. Plus the shield's still on her back. She's using her bracelets like she's supposed to. Only problem is, who the hell runs around with a shield on their back? Oh yeah, Captain America. Gah! We see that there's definitely going to be romance in the movie between Steve and Diana. Very happy about that, which is not something I would have said 20 years ago, but today I think it's an essential part of the story. Also, it says something that I completely forgot. There is a moment in this trailer where Wonder Woman is using the magic lasso, and it does look a lot better than in the teaser, thankfully. I made a point of freeze framing it, and again, it's Wonder Woman versus the Nazi commandant dude, and he actually kind of looks like he's wearing some red, so maybe the whole Red Panzer thing's going to play out after all. But I was struck more by two things. One, the cool shot of Dr. Poison, because it's totally Dr. Poison with the wind blowing at her, letting us know that she's going to be one of the primary villains, and I'm happy about that. And you also get that cool twisty jump thing where Wonder Woman's running and then she leaps over the barbed wire high fence and then lands and continues running. It's a little Spider-Man-y, but I haven't seen that in film before. And they didn't do any Flash stuff with a bunch of electricity, and it just feels a little bit more visceral than a Flash moment, but it's still clearly a cool super speed moment. And I don't know, I just dig the whole run, leap, run thing. It's reminiscent of the old Linda Carter episodes of the TV show where she would jump over a high fence, but they made it so much more dynamic and taken full advantage of her super speed. Pretty darn cool. We get that last shot of Wonder Woman deflecting some cheesy looking energy, maybe a little something they could touch up on the VFX. But it makes me think, given the visuals, that the threat's going to be a little bit more amorphous, that we're not necessarily going to get someone like Ares showing up, that it might just be supernatural stuff is breaking stuff up, kind of like, I don't know, say the end of Ghostbusters without Zool. Although, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Wonder Woman fought Zool? And then, of course, you get the cheesy Wonder Woman guitar lick. But I'll be honest with you, I'm over any issues I had with that. The old Wonder Woman theme is cheesy. You had to do something that would kind of update it. I keep hearing that it's supposed to be very much similar to something from 300. I never made it through 300. I think it's a terrible movie. I thought it was a terrible book. I'm now on board with the lick. It's fun. It's goofy. It suits the character. And then, of course, we had the Etta Candy comedy moment at the end. Felt like the editing on that was a little wonky. It definitely didn't feel like that was a scene that was shot to be cut into the end of a trailer. It ends in an awkward place. But I think it's a better joke than what we had in the teaser. And I'll be honest with you, at multiple points during this trailer, I did get chills. A lot of those moments involved bullets and bracelets. But I'm just a lot more enthusiastic about the movie after this trailer, which isn't a new thing. I remember how excited I got about Man of Steel's final trailer. But I keep thinking that this movie is going to come out early in 2017. It's a summer release. We're probably going to get another couple or three trailers after this. And for the movie to be in the place where it's at now, that it looks this good in the trailer, I'm a lot more hopeful about the movie than I had been. I do think that they're going to give us a brighter and more engagingly epic scope instead of the CGI porn that was Man of Steel. I think they're going to tell us a newer story than I was thinking that they were going to. There's a lot here that makes me more bold in predicting that this movie might actually be good and might finally fulfill the dreams we've all had of a great Wonder Woman movie. There are still caveats, of course, and I've definitely been fooled before. I was so excited to see Suicide Squad, for instance, and not a good movie. But at least now I'm not actively dreading Wonder Woman. I actually feel like maybe this is going to work. Maybe they're going to make this happen. And even if they don't, don't. If for nothing else, giving Dr. Poison such a platform and letting people know that, hey, Wonder Woman's actually got a pretty decent villain bench. I personally think that Wonder Woman has a lot of cool villains that people just haven't been exposed to enough to be able to recognize. Dr. Poison's definitely one of them, and this should help. This should help to let people know, hey, Wonder Woman's actually got some cool people to fight. You don't just have to go back to Ares and Cheetah every blasted time. The show receives social media support from Allie Batts, Dr. Ange, Between the Pages, Bill Bear, Brian Hackney, Coffee and Comics Blog, Comics Couplets, Comic Reflections, Darren and Ruth Sutherland, David Golding, DCU Movie Page, Dr. G Nerdologist, Ed Moore and Ed Moore Jr., Emily Delicious, Firestorm Fan, Flanger of the Crypt, Glenn Walker, Joseph Conrad, Keith G. Baker, King Size Comics Giant Size Fun Podcast, Luke Dobb, Mario at Luther Lang, Martin Gray, Nethead, Oscar Blue Devil, Paquita Trotamundos, PJ Frightful, Randy Caldwell, The Real Me, Richard Field, The Silver and Gold Podcast, Superman Captain Marvel, Senator Scarecrow, Trekker Talk, Who Note, celebrate the 75th anniversary of Wonder Woman with the new episode from Diablo Frank. Many guests with many opinions, including us. Unearthly Visions, Warlord Worlds Podcast, Warrior for Peace, Willie Yarbrough, and Xenozoic Xenophiles, who add that they are among the guests Dr. Ange, Ryan Daly, Paquita Trotamundos, Angela of Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace. I'd like to read you some of the comments from the last 2 episodes, but I just don't have it in me today. But I look forward to enjoying them in 2 weeks. Wonder Woman is the copyright of DC Comics Entertainment. This is a non-profit fan-produced podcast. No infringement of any copyrights are intended, and where copyrighted material appears, it is believed protected under fair use. If you enjoy the show, please feel free to leave a comment on the Diana Prince is the New Wonder Woman blog, the Rolled Spine podcast blog. Write to me at emailofdiabolu@yahoo.com, featuring 2 underscores, or just hit me up on Twitter at Commander Blanks or at Rolled Spine. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful week.